Hey guys, it's Rachel with Restorations by Rachel. Here is my project for this week. I am working on a Henry Link French Provincial set. I actually got lucky, so I snagged this dresser and that nightstand from a lady. They're moving, downsizing, and I hesitated a little bit because it was just a single nightstand, and those are kind of hard to sell with a dresser, whatever. But I went ahead and got it because of the name brand. But then that other nightstand came available, saw it pop up on the listing, not too far from me, within a few days of getting the nightstand and dresser. So I was pretty excited about it, and I'd been watching this set for a while too because she had it priced a little bit higher, and I kind of been going back and forth, and just excited it worked out where I could also have an extra nightstand to go with it. Now, before cleaning, I'm going to go ahead and remove the hardware so I can get all that cleaned, and I'll clean this up. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with it yet, if I'll just clean it up or if I'll put a different color or whatever, but for now it needs to come off and go in a baggie. There we go. And as I take the old hardware out, I like to go ahead and put a screw through the back, and that way I have something that I can hold on to as I open and close it. And then on the back side, I just put a little bit of tape to help hold it in. And that will also help when I go to paint and spray, that the paint doesn't go through the hole or any opening and get inside the drawer. Now that all the hardware is off, it is time to clean. I'm going to use Simple Green Cleaner. I just buy like a big bottle of it, and I have like just a 7th generation empty bottle that I put it in there and then dilute it up to the ratio it says to with water, and it's lasting me a very long time. It's a really inexpensive way to clean. It's a great degreaser, so I just apply it very generously over the surface, let it sit there for a couple minutes, kind of work its way in, and then I have this attachment. It comes with several attachments. I got it from Amazon. It's maybe like $7. It attaches to your drill, just like a drill bit, and then it scrubs really well on it. So I'm going to use that to scrub it really well, and then wipe it back with a damp cloth and paper towels. So next up is cleaning out the drawers. I like to vacuum them inside and out. One thing that's kind of neat sometimes you'll see how this is labeled 28. This drawer is as well. So I am not going to have to label this drawer as I take them out, and that's a nice convenient step to skip for me. So I have a little crack here in the front trim that I'm going to try to fill with some wood glue and then clamp it shut. It's a little bit challenging because of the curved edge, but we'll see what we can do. Unfortunately, my mic died here, so basically what I was talking about, I bought these syringes that are really good for putting wood glue into tight spaces on furniture. So all that I did is I had the needle off, and then I stuck it down into my glue to extract the glue into the syringe itself, and then I gave it a good wipe down before attaching the needle. I think giving it a wipe down is very important, so you can actually switch out the needles to reuse it. But it does come with several syringes, and they do say one-time use, but I've seen people use them again. So just put your needle of choice on the top and then start putting it in there, and I went along the entire edge. And then once I got that filled to where I was happy, I used my little clamps to pinch it down a little bit better and gave it a good wipe down. Going back to the manufacturer saying that the syringes are a one-time use, so you saw that I didn't use all the wood glue in my syringe. You can actually leave the excess glue that's on the tip of it there to dry, and that will act as a cap that keeps the glue wet inside the syringe. I've seen others do that. One of the drawer fronts had missing and peeling veneer, so I went ahead and just removed the area that was like loose. To kind of use my putty knife here to keep pushing until the veneer didn't want to come back in, or come off anymore. If I was going to like try to stain these or something, like I would not peel this off. Obviously, I could use like an iron to and a damp cloth to first put the damp cloth on there, and then an iron, and that will kind of reactivate the glue and hopefully help the veneer stick again. But since I'm just going to paint, and basically all of this is not very high quality wood anyways, I just went ahead and peeled back what wasn't sticking and then filled it with Bondo. While I had the Bondo out, I went ahead and made repairs on the other areas that needed it. You can see in these areas that I've put down tape. The one in the corner is just to help me form the Bondo to the same angle as the trim. And then I also have tape in some areas to help catch any excess Bondo as I'm putting it on there. That way I can peel back the tape and I'm not having to sand off any Bondo that got in those areas, because just with the contour of it, it can be a little tricky because that Bondo dries really firm. So now I'm ready to sand. I'm going to start with the tops, and all the tops are laminate. So with the nightstands and the dresser, which basically just means they're plastic, and means that they're very slick. And if you aren't very careful with your prep, then your primer will not stick. So I am going to be using an 80 grit. That's what I've found is the best in the past. And I'm going to go over the top very slowly to make sure I make lots of scratches on this surface. And I'm not worried about it looking too rough for when the paint goes on, because after you prime and do all your sanding in between coats of paint, it ends up very smooth. So right now I'm focused on getting this surface scratched up so it will accept the primer. I've finished sanding all the top of this, and now you can see that it has lost its sheen. It's no longer having a reflection on it. And then as I run my hand over the top, it feels nice and rough to the touch. So now it's time for the rest of my scuff sanding. For the flat surfaces, I'm using a 120 grit. That's because the old finish that's on here is pretty textured, and I want to try to smooth that out as much as possible. But if there wasn't a textured finish, like a 180 or even a 220 is sufficient. You just want to get some scratches on the surface so that your primer will stick to it. I prefer to start with my orbital for as many areas as I can because it works faster, and then I can switch to my surf prep for some of those right angles that my orbital won't get to. And then of course the curved areas, I'll use the Pro Form pads. Here I'm using the 1/2 inch Pro Form pad with the medium grit. I chose the 1/2 inch just because it's a little bit squishier than the ones that are a little bit smaller. And then medium grit, of course, so that I can smooth out that textured finish that's on there. From this angle, you can see just how well it contours to the trim here, and it's just really helpful for making sanding so much faster. I use that same Pro Foam pad here on the feet, and one thing I wanted to add about why I use the 1/2 inch over their 5mm or their 10mm is that the other ones will sand faster. And so since there are so many different curves on this, I want to be very careful that I'm not actually taking away from the trim. I'm just wanting to scratch up the surface. And if there are some areas like you can see on this foot that I'm going to have to come in with something a little bit stronger, but with the Pro Foam pad I can at least get most of the area scratched up, and then I can come in with something else if I need to get it smoothed out. So this came together very nicely with the glue, but I obviously want to fill that in to make it smooth. And then I'm also going to build up this underside a little bit. It looks a little bit like, I don't know, particle board, press board kind of stuff going on. So I'm afraid that any of my water-based paint, if it gets in there, it's just going to balloon on me. So I want to try to fill in where it's open with the Bondo too. So I'm going to get this filled up. I'm using Bondo again here. You'll see me use it a lot, and if you watch my videos, I use it all the time. The stuff is really stinky, so you want to make sure that you are wearing a respirator to protect your lungs, but it works exceptionally well for filling in holes and especially for building up big gaps like this. Once I had it filled and sanded to my liking, I used shellac to provide an extra barrier between that press board that was exposed and then any of the water-based products that I was going to use. I did 3 layers of this. For some of these areas that are hard to fully get into with the Pro Foam pads, I have these sanding sponges that I like to use. It comes in a kit with multiple grits. I think I used around 120 grit, just like I have been on the other areas. The drawer fronts had some areas that were more difficult to get to, so I'm using this to get into those corners. It's part of a contour sanding kit that I've purchased a while back and have used so much. So highly recommend having something like this on hand if you choose to refinish furniture as well. I'll have it in the other products I use linked in the description. All right, all the prep is finally finished. Well, I have one last step I'm going to do. So I don't know if you remember, if you've watched my dresser that I redid, his last dresser that I did is the 9-drawer Drexel that was green on the bottom, polar wrap on those upper drawers. Well, I ran into a big issue when I put my first coat of primer on. I had not sanded well enough in like the kind of contour joint areas of the drawer fronts. And so these are pretty similar. There's a lot of changes on the surface. So I grabbed this. There was a couple people, one person even commented on the video like, hey, maybe use a deglosser. So this is liquid sandpaper, and it's just going to help roughen up those areas. I did try to sand them very well, but this is where my type A is coming out, and I don't want to have to deal with that again. So this will be easy to just dampen a cloth and wipe it on there. I'm going to use gloves. You need to be careful. And that dried pretty quickly, so then it was time to prime. I'm using Kiehl's Restoration Primer. It has worked really well for me, especially on tops that are laminate like this, and so it's just 50 bucks a gallon, which is pretty economical for a good primer. Primers are quite thick when it comes to spraying, so I dilute it by a good 10%, typically just so it's thin enough to spray well and then also still have good coverage. It is the next day and the primer has adhered really well. I scratched all on the top and the sides and nothing's coming off. So now I'm going to caulk some areas that just need to be cleaned up a bit. They're mostly around the drawer fronts. There's some cracks along there, and this is going to allow it to be really smooth and have an overall better look. And now here it is after. No gaps, and that will look so much better once the paint gets on it. I ended up not having to fill too many places, so that's nice. Kind of an unexpected surprise. But I'll get all this sanded back down and get another coat of primer on. When I'm hand sanding, I often like to hold the vacuum in the other hand just to help get any dust that might want to fly into the workspace. I find it's easier to keep it more contained that way. After sanding, I'll also use my vacuum to vacuum off the surface of the dresser or whatever furniture piece I'm working on. And that does work well, but there's still a little bit of dust on there. So then I'll take a microfiber cloth to wipe that down. And I'll do that between each coat after I sand. And the times that I'm wanting to be extra vigilant about any dust, especially that last coat, I will use a tack cloth before applying paint. After the second coat of primer, it's time for paint, and I'm using the one on the left. It's Fauna by Wise Owl Paint, which is very similar to Turtle Dove Taupe by Melange Paint that I've used before. I've used this paint once prior. I used a really pretty green, Charleston green by them, and one thing I really like about this paint is that it has a built-in satin top coat, so you don't have to put a top coat on there. You know, some paints will claim that and still not be very durable, but this paint is extremely durable. It cures to 90-something% within the first couple hours, and then I think it takes, the full 30 days to fully cure, but like you'll see me later, I'll do a scratch test and you don't see anything. So it's quite durable and a really great paint. It's pretty pricey. It's about $45 if it's not on sale per quart, but I always snag a color or two when there's a sale. So I have the first coat of paint on there, and it went on with pretty good coverage. My only issue I had is that it dried kind of with a decent amount of texture, didn't level out as it was drying. That's the only downside I'm finding with this Wise Owl 1 hour paint, is since it's going to dry in an hour, it doesn't have as much time to level out as maybe some other paints. And yesterday I sprayed in the evening and it was still probably a little warm, probably in the 80s. So that could affect, dries much faster that way. But so I'm going to give it a good sand. I'm going to sand it actually more with a 220 since I'm going to have to take off some more of the paint to get it smoothed out. And then I'll get my next coat on. Well, I started out hand sanding and quickly was like, what am I doing? And I switched over to my orbital sander. I didn't start with my orbital sander at first because it will take off quite a bit, but I thought, hey, let me put the foam attachment, the interface pad on there and see if that might work well. And so that's what I did, and it worked really well. I also want to note, you could see where I showed a little bit closer shot of the speed that I had the sander on. My sander is an adjustable speed, which I really like because, like I said, the orbital sander will work really fast at taking off, but if you want to be a little bit more careful, you can adjust the speed to where it's going to sand a little bit slower. It is a little bit extra a cost over their base orbital sander, but I think it's worth it in my opinion. I will stop as I go along too and give the top of the surface a good swipe over feel with my hand just to see how smooth it is. And you can also see where the sandpaper gums up pretty easily with the paint, and so I'll take the sandpaper off and give it a good vacuum. But then I also bought this little rubber type, it looks like a giant eraser in my opinion, tool that you can have your sander on and rub it over the sandpaper, and it's going to take the paint off. Now I got it after recording this video, so I haven't used it yet, but I'm excited to try it out and hopefully extend the life of my sandpaper this way. For the curved edges, I went between Surf Prep's 1/2 inch Pro Foam pads and their 10mm pads. This one that you see here is the 1/2 inch, and it's a little bit squishier and won't take off as much as quickly. I forgot to test the paint, how well it was scratch resistant the couple other times that I've used this, but I've seen other people take coins to it, but I'm just gonna take my finger right now, and this is just 3 days. I'm not seeing any scratches. That is impressive in and of itself. The lighting's not the best, but I don't see any scratches, which that is really impressive, y'all. Especially for a satin paint. So, that is one of the things that can help make it worth the cost. Because I think it's about $45 a quart, $40 a quart. I always buy it when it's on sale. They have 25% off sales every now and then. But, if you don't have to do a top coat and it's that resistant within 72 hours, that's where you're going to get some of your money back, that you're not doing a top coat, and it's really durable. After getting it all sanded down, it was time for that second coat of paint. Well, unfortunately, that paint did not go on particularly well. I had a lot of bubbling on the surface, and what was interesting, it didn't bubble right. It wasn't I had dirt or lint on the surface. It was coming up after the fact, so it's air bubbles. I know something with my spray settings could be off, but I also reached out to a friend of mine, Caitlin. She uses this, the Wise Owl paint quite a bit, and she said biggest thing for her is she needs to dilute it down or it'll splatter on her, which is a little different than what I'm having here, but she suggested wet sanding to really smooth it out, so that's what I'm gonna do. It's the first time I've wet sanded. I've seen some videos of people doing it, especially on high gloss finish. So hopefully that's gonna fix my issue, and I'll also dilute down my paint. I don't know what happened, but somehow I did not hit record when I was doing this, but the process is really quite simple. You just spray the surface down, get it wet, and then I was taking a 400 grit sanding pad and sanding over the surface while it was wet. It does get pretty grimy, and I had a bucket of water nearby to dip my sanding sponge in to kind of clean it off, but it got it so smooth. And then you just take another damp cloth to wipe it back and then finish it off with a paper towel like you can see me doing. You just want to make sure you're getting any kind of sanding residue off of there. Then after watering down my paint more, I was ready to put another coat on. I wish I'd shown you the consistency of it, but I'll make sure to do that next time. But it went on really well and smooth, and so then it was ready to do the final steps. I still needed to clean up the hardware, so I put it in a mixture of water and vinegar and then put it on the stove top to come up to a boil and let it simmer for about 10-15 minutes before giving it a good clean. I used Brasso to polish it, but the pieces didn't polish very evenly, unfortunately. So then I pivoted to using a spray paint, and this one's new to me, and I love the color, and it went on really smooth. Sometimes you can have a little bit of trouble with the spray paint wanting to bubble on some spots, but this went on really uniform, really smooth, and really pretty, and I really like the color. For hardware like this with lots of curves and crevices, I make sure to spray from lots of different angles to make sure every area gets covered. I'm going to add paper to the interior of these drawers, so before I do that, I'm giving it a good wipe down so any dirt and dust is off of that before I apply my paper. I don't do anything fancy to measure. I just cut it a little bit wider than the width of the drawer, and then I'll also cut off some excess in the back to make it easier to insert. Then just pull off the paper, and I like to line up the straight edge with the front of the drawer so you have that pretty line when you open the drawer, and smooth it out with a credit card, gift card, whatever you have. I used a credit card, so that's why I did not record it, but then you just trim off the excess with some type of knife. I'm using an inexpensive craft knife from Amazon. Since I sprayed with the drawers in, I needed to touch up around the edges of the drawers, so I'm just using paint from my spray canister and a foam brush, and it just took 2 coats to get full coverage. Once I have the entire surface covered like I want, then I will make one last final swipe to make it all smooth. Okay, we're finally at the finish line. Here's a look back at where we started. It was good shape overall. Just that one nightstand had some damage under the trim, and besides that, it was just really minor, but it had that dated yellow finish. But after some repairs and some new paint, here it is now. Isn't it amazing what a little paint can do? When I looked at it before, I mostly saw just dated yellow finish, but now you see just this pretty neutral color, and I feel like it has a nice feminine touch to it. I could really see this in a girl's bedroom, maybe in a guest bedroom. It just, I don't know, the light color makes me happy, especially paired with the gold hardware. As far as numbers go, my initial investment was $200 for the pieces, and then I spent around $85 with paint, spray paint, wallpaper, sandpaper, all those miscellaneous supplies that go into it. After some market research, I decided to list it on Facebook Marketplace for $1,200. Mostly it's the Henry Link name that helps fetch that price, as well as it being a set. So I do have someone coming to look at it today, the release date of this video, so I'm hoping it works out, and as always, I'll keep you updated in the communities tab, so if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and you can follow along. I'll let you know when things sell and give you a profit breakdown and all that. So thank you again for watching. Always appreciate y'all hanging around to the end, and would love to know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time.